I really wanted to do a movie that was all action and all fun and very escapist, like movies I was raised on when I was a kid.
I just finished Star Wars and I was on the beach in Hawaii, and Steve came over to visit. He was telling me how he wanted to do an action-adventure film like James Bond films. And I said, I've got just the thing for you.
Indiana Jones is an archaeologist. In his spare time, he's a grave robber.
The movie essentially is going to be very kinetic and very prismatic. It's a fast-paced, fast-action picture.
Let me ask you a question. How many times have you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Just once, 3 or 4 times, a dozen, 4 dozen times perhaps? Maybe you've never seen it at all, in which case, stop what you're doing right now and go watch it on Netflix. Me? Oh, I've probably seen it no less than 30 or 40 times, but this isn't about me. This is about the great American classic, one of my all-time favorite films,
Raiders of the Lost Ark. A film from Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
With the film's 40th anniversary practically right around the corner, I wanted to kick off our second year of making videos by celebrating the brilliance of Raiders, why we keep coming back to it again and again, and explore just a bit of its hidden multitudes. Because surely in all those rewatches, some of the film's impact might be lost on us, all the little things that made it special in the first place. That doesn't just apply to what's on the screen in front of us, but what went behind it as well. You might already know this story, what the 2 filmmakers and crew behind the film envisioned, and what they sacrificed to get it done. Or maybe you don't know it. Regardless of who you are, I humbly ask you a question. Why don't we go see God together right now?
I've got nothing better to do.
Come back home!
It's time we explore the awesome power of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The year is 1977. You're Steven Spielberg, a rising star director in blockbuster Hollywood, but far from being one of the greats. Your best friend, George Lucas, is about to release the first chapter in his painstakingly cobbled together new space opera film,
Star Wars.
And so, per tradition, either time either you or Lucas are about to release a film, you take a trip to Hawaii on opening weekend. As you sit there on the beach, building a sandcastle with your best bro, you talk about your ideas for your next film. Some sort of globe-trotting action-adventure spectacle, sort of like James Bond. That's when Lucas whips out an idea he's been sitting on for 10 years, about as long as Star Wars. The story of a soldier of fortune in search of rare antiquities named Indiana Smith. Yup, Smith. The last name aside, you agree to take on the film after you finish your next project, 1941. Finally, you and Lucas finish building your sandcastle and wait for the tide to come in. Once again, per tradition, if the tide comes in and destroys the castle, the next film will be a flop. But if the castle stays standing, well, maybe the film will do alright. As the day draws to a close, you can probably guess what happened to that castle. Before working on Raiders, Steven Spielberg was already a great filmmaker, but a problematic one. In spite of the smash success of both Jaws in 1975 and Close Encounters of the Third Kind later in 1977, both films went absurdly over budget and over schedule. Jaws in particular was 100 days over schedule, just about tripling the length of the entire shoot. It's hard to argue with the craftsmanship of the final product in both films, but the messy production behind the scenes was starting to become a dangerous trend. Spielberg's 1979 screwball comedy 1941 not only went 100 days over schedule, but was a critical and commercial failure, the first of its kind in Spielberg's career. When it came time to do Raiders, time to take the money his best friend and executive producer George Lucas was entrusting him with, Spielberg had to make a change. The type of change that any rising filmmaker makes in their career. He became more efficient.
So in a sense, for me, Raiders was my chance to prove myself that I could responsibly direct a movie not only on budget and on schedule, but ahead of budget and ahead of schedule. And I think that's why the film's tight. I really think the movie is tight.
In January 1978, over the course of 5 or so days, Spielberg, Lucas, and Lawrence Kasdan, who would later be the screenwriter for Empire Strikes Back, locked themselves in a room and fleshed out the entirety of Raiders of the Lost Ark from top to bottom. Indiana Jones is a bounty hunter, though the kind of guy that returns artifacts to museums. He tangles with the superstitious. He carries a whip. He's a crack shot with a pistol. He even knows karate. Actually, scratch that. It's just a whip and a gun. He works at a museum. No, he's a professor at a college. He has a rival even, sort of like Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. He has a German double agent love interest. There's a car chase in the streets of Cairo. Indy even goes to Hong Kong at some point. The iteration gets a little out of hand, but by the very end of it, Kasdan knows what film he's going to write, and Spielberg the type of movie he's going to direct. A film reminiscent of the types of movies he and Lucas grew up with. The Republic adventure serials of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, like Spy Smasher, Gunga Din, or The Mask of Zorro, filled with big steaks,
I hate snakes, Chuck!
and even bigger set pieces. Every serial ended in a cliffhanger, and viewers wouldn't know what happened to the main hero until the following week. It's the type of B-movie storytelling Hollywood has avoided for decades. At the same time, it's a film infused with nostalgia for classical Hollywood romance and adventure, like Casablanca or The Treasure of Sierra Madre. Though the film's intentions were simple, the vision was decidedly ambitious, and that did not sit well with most of Hollywood. Spielberg and Lucas pitched Raiders of the Lost Ark to nearly every major studio on the condition of one major deal. The studio would not only finance the entire production, but would earn only 60% of the gross profit up to a certain amount, after which Lucas would take his 40% and all the gross profits past the minimum set in the deal. Say what you will about Lucas as a storyteller, but man, is that guy an aggressive businessman. Of course, nearly every studio rejected the deal. Every studio except Paramount executive Michael Eisner, claiming Raiders was the best script he had ever read. In order to bring Raiders to life, Lucas and Spielberg would not only need to break both creative and technical barriers in action filmmaking, but would need to redefine the adventure genre. And they needed to do it on the back of someone who audiences could trust, someone who they could root for, someone like Harrison Ford. In 1981, you were one of two people. Either you wanted to fuck Harrison Ford, or you wanted to be Harrison Ford. The man was suave, but not too suave, maybe a little rough around the edges. He could take you out to a dinner, and then get into a fistfight after the date. That's just who he was. In many ways, Ford, and of course the character of Indy, was America's response to James Bond. But Spielberg and Lucas didn't exactly see it that way at first. In fact, they initially disagreed on casting Ford. He might have been a little too recognizable as Han Solo, and even on the page, Indy's character already had some Solo in him. But amazingly, the casting of Ford propelled the film and Indy himself up through the stratosphere. He took direct involvement in the script, changing dialogue, completely altering how certain lines were read.
Son of a bitch.
Most importantly, he did almost all of his stunts and endeavored to take a beating as often as possible. This isn't just a film where the lead character narrowly defies deathly scenario after deathly scenario. It's a film where the character gets absolutely pummeled between each scenario. The character of Indy was already strong on the page, a world-weary anti-hero with wit and cunning, but so much of Indy's greatness exploded onto the screen purely because of Ford.
It's just one more useless experience.
With arguably the most important creative decision out of the way, all Spielberg needed was a cast and crew of matching caliber. In front of the camera, he primarily chose a modest selection of TV actors to comprise Indy's supporting cast. Karen Allen as love interest Marion Ravenwood, Paul Freeman as arch-nemesis Belloc, John Rhys-Davies as Sala, and Ronald Lacey as Major Totes. Behind the camera, he worked with longtime Hollywood cinematographer Douglas Slocum, Star Wars production designer Norman Reynolds, Star Wars art director Leslie Dilley, Spielberg's trusted editor Michael Kahn, and of course, the ever-brilliant John Williams as the composer. The film settled on a budget of $20 million, roughly $57 million if adjusted for inflation today. In his mind, Spielberg was fully committed to shooting a simple B flick and nothing more. However, because of the incredible talent both behind and in front of the camera, Raiders of the Lost Ark was about to blossom into something far more powerful. When the camera started rolling on Raiders, Spielberg had two underlying goals for the film's production: create a fast-paced, fast-action B-movie, and do it in 90 days or less. With the amount and complexity of scenes spread throughout the shoot, there's only one way to accomplish either of these goals, and that was to shoot the film as aggressively as the film itself. With the help of associate producer Robert Watts, location scout for Lucas on Star Wars, the cast and crew of Raiders shot a globe-trotting picture. While sets were built in L Street Studios in London, production kicked off in Kauai, Hawaii for the opening of the film. Not long after, they were in Tunisia for the long and arduous Egypt chapter of Raiders, sometimes reutilizing specific locations from the shoot of Star Wars. Ironically, the crew never stepped one foot in Egypt for the film. Not to mention, Spielberg didn't see a single daily for the first 4 weeks of shooting in Tunisia. The advent of digital cameras today sort of eliminates this problem, but imagine shooting scenes like this for 4 weeks straight and not seeing a single frame of footage. I would probably faint. All the while, Spielberg was focused on shooting scenes with as few takes as possible. It was the only way to even remotely ensure the film would stay on schedule. Even with the likes of Slocum, Reynolds, Ford, or any of the all-star cast and crew Spielberg was surrounded by, Raiders of the Lost Ark was poised to be a disaster. And I'm pretty sure Spielberg knew this. Because if he didn't, he would have never hired a team of 5 different illustrators in pre-production to storyboard the whole entire film, something Spielberg never did before and has never done since Raiders.
Every shot in this movie somewhere, in some archive, probably my archive, has the storyboard.
Storyboards are one of the key factors that saved the film's production, along with the fact that Spielberg was largely surrounded by his best friend's top men. This wasn't just a big-budget movie shoot, but the passion project of a group of friends. Very talented friends.
Take 5.
The tight shoot and fast action of Raiders would have strangled a lesser group of actors and crewmen, but it actually led to some unthinkable brilliance, much of which is ingrained in the tomes of film history. Harrison Ford did almost all of his own stunts for the film, including running from an actual 300-pound fiberglass boulder, bruising a few ribs by dragging himself behind a truck, and tearing a ligament in his leg when a runaway airplane ran over his knee. Apparently he just wrapped his leg in ice and kept going. A growing number of crew members in Tunisia caught dysentery, and eventually so did Ford. So to save time, instead of shooting this entire storyboarded, choreographed fight scene with the swordsman in the... Harrison just shot the guy. Spielberg and his producers bought every single snake they could find in a pet shop from London and south of England, and still didn't have nearly enough snakes for this scene. So they imported legless lizards, and put tubes around them to look like snakes. You can't see it in the film today, but the glass shield used to protect Ford from the Cobra unintentionally reflected the camera, which was easily viewable in the theatrical release of the film on its debut. Karen Allen's stunt double refused to perform around snakes, so Spielberg just had their snake handler Stephen Edge shave his legs and wear a dress. And did I mention The Well of Souls was shot in the Overlook Hotel from The Shining? A fly is crawling into Belloc's mouth in the scene, and instead of calling cut, Freeman just kept going. Lucas got this monkey to do the Hail Hitler salute by holding a grape over its head. This entire scene with Marion and Belloc in the tent was improvised. The entire airplane fight was improvised. Ronald Lacey isn't even in the scene. It's literally just a stump with his jacket and a hat. How did they get away with that? Every film is filled with its own share of movie mistakes and equal amounts of hidden brilliance, but Raiders, to me, stands above so many other films in these regards. These feel like practical solutions even the lowest of low-budget filmmakers might come up with, or like scenes the most detail-oriented auteurs of action-adventure cinema might conceive, when Spielberg was neither working with a small budget, nor was taking to the film like an auteur. Rather, the film was being made by the skin of his teeth, yet no scene ever completely defeated him. Just like Indiana Jones, who constantly finds himself in a never-ending string of unwinnable situations, outmanned, outgunned, and pushed to his limits. Yet Indy always makes it out on top, a crawl to nail-biting victory that never falls short on thrills. It's not only the central creative decision that elevates the entire film, but the style of production that makes Raiders the feat of cutthroat movie making it represents today.
I don't know, I'm making this up as I go.
And then there's the film's intentional brilliance, the genius immediately present in Raiders. The authentic, lived-in feel of locations and characters, both in reflecting the 1930s and the sense of adventure Raiders thrives upon. All the film's gags and visual humor, the type of humor that's as likely to make a kid laugh as the parent they're watching it with. The astounding direction of extras and crowds, how they participate in the film's set pieces, and how often Slocum fills the frame with their presence. And of course, Slocum himself, his affinity for hero shots, steady wide-shot action sequences, and super expressive close-ups. Enough can't be said about what Williams does for literally anything on the screen, sometimes completely controlling how we feel at crucial moments in the story. Take this moment on the airplane near the beginning of the film, for instance, where we first meet Tote. Without Williams' music, our first impression of him might be far more ambiguous, and would thus muddle his first encounter with Indy. And then there's the set pieces. The set pieces, the set pieces, the set pieces. The parts of the film most inspired by the Republic adventure serials that precede it, Raiders' white-knuckling action scenes are some of the best in all of cinema. They're the culmination of Ford's physical approach to Indy, Slocum's captivating cinematography, Williams' soaring music, super committed stuntmen, dedication to practical effects and stunts, loads of pre-production and storyboarding, Kahn's genius editing, and Spielberg's keen regard for the audience.
This and the other grave goods that we found in the area have given us a reason to date the find as we have. Any questions?
As fast-paced as both the shoot and the film itself was, there's a surprising smattering of slower, more endearing moments spread throughout Raiders. How about the scenes after Marion's supposed death? An Indian grief, a methodical one-take exchange with his arch-nemesis, and a more serious, even more foreboding deliberation about the Ark with Sala. Or the exceptional map room scene, a controlled yet anxious crawl to the Ark's location, practically guided only by Williams' masterful score. And my personal favorite, this one-take scene after the truck chase, a beautiful farewell to the grueling Egypt chapter of the film.
His energetic fist should be ready
However, arguably some of the best of these slower scenes take place between Indy and Marion. It's their inability to truly love each other, to work past the woes of their past, and fall into step with each other's worlds. This is why their eventual embrace feels so right. If this were your typical Hollywood romance, Indy would feel a whole lot less human. He would be James Bond. And if Marion never stood up for herself, she would have felt out of place in this adventure. Indy and Marion form the heart of Raiders, and seamlessly blend the film among the most timeless adventure romances in Hollywood history. Usually this is the part of the video where I discuss the thematic brilliance of whatever show, movie, or game I'm talking about, but in the case of Raiders of the Lost Ark, there is none. There's no grand statement or set of messages being conveyed to the viewer, not even about religion or philosophy. Perhaps there's something to be said about the power of faith, the ability to look beyond worldly possessions and instead seek the immaterial, the very reason Indy and Marion survive the final boss fight of the film. But once again, for all intents and purposes, Raiders was always meant to be a B-flick and nothing more. Yet, there is something compellingly human about the film, something that deeply resonates with everyone who watches it. I think if there is intrinsic meaning to be siphoned from Raiders, it's in our capacity to imagine. Our never-ending fascination with the fantastic, and our desire to escape. Of course, it's an escapist movie, but has a movie built on such a ridiculous premise ever felt so real? And does it feel that way because of how it's presented, how we project our imagination on it, or both? I have no idea. But if the film's legacy and influence are any indication, maybe it can be safely said that the power of Raiders is universal. If you were to ask me for the thing about Raiders of the Lost Ark that makes it universal, the thing that speaks to me as an adult, that spoke to me as a child, it's the idea that our thirst for the unknown may never be quenched. There's always some treasure to be unearthed from a hidden tomb, or a revelation lying at the end of a perilous journey. There's always the sneaking curiosity of what might have been with a former love, or the simmering regret of not following your instincts. Raiders may not explore these emotions in extreme depth, but they permeate the film nonetheless. Just consider how in Indy's quest for the Ark, the ultimate prize is not the Ark itself, but Marion, while the Ark by film's end returns seemingly to the unknown, where it belongs. This doesn't mean we should never stop searching for the unknown, but we should never let the search erase our humanity. For the very thing lying in reach is sometimes worth far more than what's over the horizon. After an extremely intense, months-long shoot, Raiders of the Lost Ark's production finally came to an end, 11 days early. Not only did Spielberg stay within budget and within schedule, but he undercut the schedule. The limited number of takes filmed for each scene made the editing process difficult, but you'd never be able to tell that after watching the final cut of the film. Every risk Spielberg and Lucas did for Raiders, from their pitch all the way down to editing, was about to pay off. Despite a modest box office debut, Raiders of the Lost Ark went on to be the highest-grossing film of 1981, win 5 Academy Awards, and be immortalized as one of the greatest films ever made. Even more so, Raiders transformed Spielberg from a fledgling filmmaker in the throes of blockbuster Hollywood to becoming one of the greatest directors of modern film, the type of filmmaker who would direct Jurassic Park and Schindler's List back-to-back just 20 years later. This is arguably Harrison Ford's greatest performance ever put to screen, and one of Williams' very best scores. But beyond all the hyperbolic praise that can be thrown at Raiders, the film's greatest victory may just be its unfailing ability to inspire. The reason I chose Raiders of the Lost Ark for the subject of this channel's first film video, a 40-year-old movie that loses more and more relevance the further we get from 1981, is that, for me personally, there's never been a film that more effectively reminds me what I love about cinema. To transport your audience through time, evoke their thrill, joy, and anguish, and make the unbelievable believable. Though these feats have been achieved time and time again with gravitas and awe, I can't say another filmmaker has been more successful at achieving them than Steven Spielberg. And I'm not alone to believe that either. Uncharted, Tomb Raider, The Mummy, The First Avenger, Guardians of the Galaxy, the renewal of the action-adventure genre as a cornerstone of the film industry, or, strangely, even the practice of archaeology. You don't need to look far to see the impact Raiders has had on the storytellers of today, and you won't have to look hard to see the impact it has on the storytellers of tomorrow either.
It belongs in a cupboard!
Alternatively, in the same way that seeing Raiders reminds me what I love about film, the story of its creation reminds me of what I love about filmmaking. It's not just the budgeting, location scouting, cameras, lights, and boom mics. It's sometimes about finding the craziest solution to your problems, reusing and repurposing, bringing your love for something to life, and most importantly, creating something with your friends. Raiders began on a beach with 2 dudes building a sandcastle, and very likely ended the same way on its opening weekend. If that doesn't tell you how personal Raiders was to the bond of Lucas and Spielberg, how the film became a big, beautiful embodiment of their friendship, then knowing everything else that went into the film certainly will. As I continue to collaborate with my years-long high school friends today on my short films and their albums, this remains to be a touching and ever-inspiring fact.
I think what makes a good director more than anything else is just having a good imagination. You have a good imagination and a good story sense, and you like to tell stories. And you know a good story when you hear one. And you just know what entertains you, know what pleases you personally, and you think you can maybe turn around and project it onto a lot of other people.
Is that perhaps the awesome power of Raiders of the Lost Ark? Is it the unthinkable brilliance of the film, or its impressive craftsmanship? Is it the film's exploration of the unknown, or its epic collaboration between friends and storytellers? Is it all of these things, or something else entirely? That is up for you to decide. Hey everyone, thank you for watching the entire video and welcome to the end of it. Before you go anywhere though, just want to talk about a couple things for the channel and plug a few things as well. Now of course in 1977 when Steven Spielberg shook George Lucas's hand to make Raiders of the Lost Ark, he did so on one major condition, which was if Steven was going to make even just one Indiana Jones film, he had to make a trilogy. And so you can't really talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark without also talking about Temple of Doom and Last Crusade. And at that point, why not also just talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Well, I'm going to be talking about all 3 of those films in one big video coming next year at the beginning of 2021. So that'll not be my next video. My next video is a bit more complicated. I'll talk about that in a second. But first, if you guys are enjoying the community that we're growing here on the channel, then please consider joining our official Discord, Sator's ArTorrium. You can find a link to join it in the description below. We have a growing community. It's sort of a combination between this channel and my Twitch community, but a growing community of people who love games and movies and shows and a lot of the stuff I talk about here on the channel. So if you want to be a part of that community and sort of talk to me directly about stuff I've done in my videos, or you know, just hang out, I implore you to click on the link below in the description and join our Discord. As I said, the Discord is partially joined with my Twitch channel. For those of you who don't know, I stream pretty regularly on Twitch, and that goes for the playthrough that I used gameplay from for my Last of Us Part 2 video. That was streamed from my Twitch channel. So if you want to see me stream games that come out, especially in the fall, there's a lot of new games coming out like Cyberpunk, Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed, as well as games that I'm using the footage for in a future ArTorr video, then you should follow me on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Sator. You can also follow me on Twitter at ParksHarmon. And with that being said, I want to tell you all about my next video. I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but it is about Star Wars. It's a video I said I would do earlier in the year, and it's about a video game. I think that narrows it down, but just to narrow it down as much as possible, here's one more hint.